Chowfire Dialogue Roundtable discussion on ceasefire violations in Jammu and Kashmir. We have a distinguished panel today with us. The chairperson for today's RT is Ambassador Vivek Katju. And to lead the discussions, we have three panelists who need no introduction: Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain, Ms. Nirupama Subrahmaniam, and Dr. Happymon Jacob. I request the chair to kindly begin the RT with his initial remarks.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me this morning. We have, I'm told, two things to perform, to attend to today. One is, of course, the RT, and the second is the launch of this website. The panel couldn't be better. We discuss various aspects of the current situation of the LOC and the IB in JNK. But I'm told that first we've got to launch the website, so may I invite Tanvi to take over and to guide us and help us launch the website, but also tell us a little bit about what the website is and proposes to do.
So today is a very special day for us, both at the Chowfire Dialogue as well as at JU. We are gathered here today to launch Dr. Happymon Jacob's online initiative, a new website called the Indo-Pak Conflict Monitor. The Indo-Pak Conflict Monitor, IPCM, is a research initiative to monitor ceasefire violations, conflict patterns, and escalation dynamics between India and Pakistan, a unique and independent research project that has been running for the past 2 years and is being led by Dr. Happymon Jacob. It's indeed a very proud and exciting moment for us today to launch the IPCM website. I will request the chairperson, Ambassador Katju, to kindly launch the website by putting in the URL in Google.
So just enter. Thank you.
Presentation about the website, and then I will hand it over back to the chair for beginning the RT. So, welcome everyone to our website, the Indo-Pak Conflict Monitor. To repeat, IPCM is an independent research initiative to monitor ceasefire violations, conflict patterns, and escalation dynamics between India and Pakistan. The project began in 2016 with a study on ceasefire violations on the Indo-Pak border in JNK. The line of control and the international border, the working boundary for Pakistan, between the two countries in JNK have been witnessing repeated violations of the ceasefire agreement agreed to by the militaries of India and Pakistan in November 2003 over the past many years. With the new law and relations between India and Pakistan, ceasefire violations have gone up exponentially. These ceasefire violations are a significant trigger for bilateral military, political, and diplomatic tensions. They have the potential to not only begin a crisis, but also to escalate an ongoing crisis, especially in the aftermath of terror incidents. Indeed, barring the terror attacks on Mumbai in 2008 and the Uri attacks in September 2016, ceasefire violations have been the single most prominent trigger of tensions and conflict escalation between New Delhi and Islamabad in the past decade. So the project began with the objective of examining what causes ceasefire violations and to look beyond the unicausal explanations offered by India and Pakistan for these violations, most of which go unnoticed and are not taken up by the 2004 resolution. This project documents, explores, and analyzes the trends, patterns, and major causes of ceasefire violations, and examines the linkage between ceasefire violations and escalation dynamics. Next. In 2017, a research report of the study was published by the United States Institute of Peace titled Ceasefire Violations in Jammu and Kashmir, A Line on Fire, authored by Dr. Jacob. We'd be happy to share copies offline, soft copies as well as hard copies of the paper. The larger comprehensive study is in the form of a book, which is being considered by a leading university press for publication. We're expecting the book to be published later this year. So today we are launching the Indo-Pak Conflict Monitor, which regularly monitors ceasefire violations on the Indo-Pak border and assesses escalation dynamics and makes this data and analytical content publicly available. Next. So what is unique about this website? This is a unique endeavor that generates data on ceasefire violations on the Indo-Pak border, especially in Jammu and Kashmir, on a daily basis. Besides official data, the project offers a rich repository of primary data mined and generated from open sources in India and Pakistan. I'm just going to ask Manu to quickly take us through the website and show you a live ticker that we have on the home page. So this is a live ticker which monitors ceasefire violations on the Indo-Pak border every day. The blue axis is for India and the green axis and the green line is for Pakistan. We have the days and then the number of violations on the y-axis here. So the website offers primary data in the form of data sheets and analytical graphs that examine and explain the major causes, nature and patterns in ceasefire violations and the escalation between India and Pakistan in Jammu and Kashmir from 2002 to 2018. We have daily news updates of ceasefire violations in J&K and regularly updated data sheets and statistics on ceasefire violations and Indo-Pak escalation and conflict. Next. The Conflict Monitor is the result of a 2-year research based on extensive and painstaking field visits to the border areas on the Indian and the Pakistani side. I'll ask Manu to go back to the page on visits to the border, where we've listed all the visits that have been made to the Indian side of the border and the Pakistani side of the border from 2016 to 2017. All of them undertaken by Dr. Jacob over a 2-year period. All right. The project team, led by Dr. Jacob, has conducted over 100 in-depth interviews with Indian and Pakistani military officials and diplomats, serving as well as retired. Some of them are sitting here in this room, as well as with academics and with defense analysts. And a record of these interviews can be found on the oral history page of the website. Where we've listed all the interviews that the project has done over the 2-year period, and more interviews will take place. They will be listed here. Next. I'd also like to draw your attention to our upcoming feature, which is the IPCM podcast. The podcast consists of interactions and interviews with experts on issues such as CFPs, Indo-Pak relations, and conflict escalation, as well as conflict resolution. We did a recent podcast with Syed Ata Hasnain, and the podcast should be up as soon as it's finished with its editorial process. We are also collaborating with other media outlets for our podcast. Besides these, the website also offers periodic analytical reports and assessments, as well as policy prescriptions, relevant maps, brief explainers on Indo-Pak conflicts, a chronology and state of play of Indo-Pak CBMs, important documents such as treaties, conventions, bilateral agreements, as well as related publications and research content. Next. So what about the IPCM data? Now, there is no systematic official data on ceasefire violations available in the public domain, either in India or in Pakistan. let alone the data which specifies the causes of ceasefire violations and the places where they take place. So to overcome this lack of meaningful data, two new data sets were created separately for India and for Pakistan by listing all the CFVs reported in open sources in India and in Pakistan, first from 2002 to 2016 and then 2017 onward. Open sources primarily include print media reports and digital media reports in India and in Pakistan. Media reports usually include the date, location, and in some cases even the cause of the ceasefire violation, as well as the casualties as indicated by security officials. Now, all the CFVs don't get reported in the press, and as a result, the number of CFVs that can be seen on the database will be significantly lower than the number of CFVs that are accounted for in official records. However, the project's database is able to provide a chronological order of the CFVs. Can I ask Manu to quickly go on the CFV data page of the website, just run you through how the data is organized. The project, ceasefire violations. So on this page you have two categories, data and analysis. If you go to any of the year, for instance 2016, first you have what the official data states, and then the data recorded by the IPCM database, which is a chronology of all the ceasefire violations reported on both sides of the border. So this is very useful in understanding patterns, locations, and causes of ceasefire violations between India and Pakistan. Back to the presentation. Now, a second form of data set was also created, consisting of the incidents that represent escalation as reported by India and Pakistan. We divided, so this is the escalation data sheet. We divided the escalation categories, escalation into three categories: political, diplomatic, and military escalation. Further, the escalation was given values in terms of minor, moderate, and major. Wherever an engagement has taken place between the two countries, we noted it as a positive development. And finally, the two data sets, CFV and escalation, were juxtaposed with each other to examine what is the linkage between the CFVs and escalation. In the escalation page on the website, in the analysis section, we have graphs which show the linkage between CFVs and escalation between the two countries. Finally, what is in the pipeline? What's coming up? So we're going to have regular spin-off publications in the form of research projects and newspaper articles that are being contributed by the project team, as well as media reports that are being written by people associated with the project. Conflict explainers, which are going to be brief, authoritative, in-depth, and up-to-date reports on each of the major conflicts between India and Pakistan, such as the Sil Creek, Siachen, Jammu and Kashmir, and others. A CDM report card, where we revisit the major India-Pakistan CDMs and review their performance record. And finally, we also hope to take up a study where we can correlate CFVs with other political and strategic factors at the national and international level. For instance, what is the connection of CFVs with terror incidents, with elections taking place, with leadership change in both countries, and other such factors. Finally, let me introduce the team of Indo-Pak Conflict Monitor to you. Happymon Jacob, who is the honorary director and the project head, and who has painstakingly conducted the 2-year research through his field visits, his in-depth research, as well as interviews. I'm Tanvi, I'm the project coordinator of IPCM. We have Manu, who's sitting here, running us through the presentation, who is the research associate. Amanat, who couldn't come here today because of family engagement, is our data analyst. If you go to the analysis sections of the website, you'll see these beautiful graphs that have been made. Everything has been designed by Amanat. We're missing her here. IPCM's advisory board is a stellar board with Professor Amitabh Mattu, Lieutenant General retired Vahid Ashad from Pakistan, General Ata Hasnain, who's here with us, Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, former DGMO, he couldn't join us today, Ambassador Aziz Ahmed Khan, former Pakistan High Commissioner to India, Nicole Winshuk from the Ottawa Dialogue, and Dr. Mona Yusuf, who is the Vice President of the South Asia program at USIP in DC. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tanvi. I think, and all the best for your website. I hope it will, I'm sure it will have accurate information.
We'll try our best, sir.
We need good and accurate information and all that happens. But so now we can begin the RT. The continuing situation at the LC and the IB in J&K is attracting a great deal of attention. It is leading to dislocation of civilian populations. It is causing distress. It's leading to casualties and disrupting life. It's obviously not a happy thing. However, I for one cannot place it in an isolated framework. It is part of Indo-Pakistan relations and has to be viewed in that context. We all know what Pakistan has been up to for the last 3 decades, and this is a manifestation of that Pakistani approach. Hence, if one were to only look at it in an isolated way, I think one will reach misleading conclusions. We have 3 very good panelists. Before I hand over to them, I would only say that I, for one, as part of my professional career as a Joint Secretary of IPA, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, a job which my friend and colleague Raghavan also did. But I don't know whether it used to happen in his time, but for 6 years when I did that job, the first thing that I saw every morning was a list of the firing that had taken place and what was happening sector by sector. It was put out by the army headquarters, that was standard reading, but and that was of course between 1995 and 2001 when the LC and the IB was live. It predates the ceasefire of 2003. The situation was bad then, and we all know why it was bad. With those words, may I request Ata to kick off this time? Yes, I think because you could give us a factual situation. And after that, I'll ask Nirupama and then Happy will go.
I'll come there.
The conclusion. And Happy is, I'll just say one other thing. Happy is in a unique position because he's gone, travelled along the IB and the LC on both sides. Though I do believe, as he will tell you, that he had far greater access on our side than on the Pakistani side. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely.
And why should it be so?
Should it be so? Yes. But I'm only repeating a factual situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek sir, Vivek bhai, thank you very much for the introduction. In fact, I would look forward to you actually being a panelist, because from your strategic perspective would have emerged from you completely. I'm sure we'll hear from you at the end of the entire discussion.
Strategic decision to place.
Yeah. So I suppose you'll give me about 20, 21, 22 minutes or so.
We have
That's
up to what time?
1:15. Then we have
1:15.
If you have good questions, maybe a little bit more.
So if
We can take 10 minutes.
you'll take 10 minutes, you'll take 20.
That'll be great.
That's half an hour. 10. That's 40. So that will leave us a good hour for, almost an hour for discussions. Okay?
Okay, thank you for this wonderful presence here on a Saturday morning. The fact that there is such a presence here just goes to show that there is tremendous interest in what's happening on the LOC. And after Holi, to have come and be hearing this. I've got for you a single slide which I've placed there, which I think is a superb depiction of the valleys area and a portion of the Jammu zone, at least the line of control, if nothing else, the line of control, which is, here, this is in purple. This is the line of control. I think the line of control is being seen in this. And I'll not try and go into the background and all these things first. I'll jump straight to the situation today to try and update you as to what is happening currently and why do I think it's happening that way. But before that, I do want to clarify one or two things for people who may not have experienced this at all or not heard too much about it earlier. What is the LOC, what is the LAC and what is the AGPL? You should know that. The line of control is an imaginary line, delineated and demarcated. Both the armies are eyeball to eyeball, but that doesn't mean that there are not standoff distances. There are areas where there are large standoff distances. There is a fence of 750 kilometers, which is an anti-infiltration fence. It does not have a zero counter-infiltration capability. The LOC, the one which you're seeing here, all along, is a 750 kilometers going into Ladakh and going up to Kargil, going up to Turtok. The AGPL, or the actual ground position line, is the name of the line which is in Siachen, which has only been subsequently been created after 1984. The LAC relates to China, is the line of actual control, which is not demarcated and not delineated. So you must just remember this. The LOC, you must remember one other important characteristics of the LOC. There is, from an army parlance, there is a tactical operational notion here called grabbers keepers. He who grabs keeps. So every other day, not very frequently, but there will be occasions when you will find an odd army, one of the armies may conduct an operation for a tactical purpose to gain and secure a foothold or an operational advantage and things like that. It will be reported in the media, there will be lots of things happening around it, but once you've occupied that piece of ground, you're not going to leave it. It happened in Kargil, where ultimately we forced the Pakistanis to vacate that area. That's a different thing. Now, I draw your attention here. You see, you've got Uri here. Oh, I'm so sorry. You've got Uri here, and you've got Urish here. Very important, the Haji period is in the middle here. Now all this while in the last 2-3 years, you have been hearing of firing all south of the Pir Panjab. This is the south of the Pir Panjab. This is the areas of Poonch, Rajouri, Mendhar, Naushera, where you had firing yesterday and day before yesterday also. And suddenly you found from 22nd of February, you found firing taking place here in Uri. Why is this suddenly? So let me just try and update you on that particular aspect itself. You see, mostly the understanding is that in the army will always project to you that mostly this firing is being done for the purpose of helping in infiltration. I sometimes challenge that myself as an ex-corps commander, because I'll explain to you that while all the firing is taking place in south of Pir Panjab, not a single bit of infiltration has taken place in Pir Panjab, south of Pir Panjab. Right? There is hardly a terrorist presence in Rajouri or Poonch today. And therefore, this notion that this is happening for infiltration has to be understood in the larger context. It is not for infiltration in that area. This has been largely happening for two purposes. One is to ensure that an area which is not generally devoid of terrorist activities, that's the Poonch to Jammu area, there is at least a semblance of violent activity taking place, so that the Jammu region is also seen to be akin to what is happening in Kashmir. That is one explanation. The other explanation from a strategic angle again is that diversion of the Indian Army's focus is to the Rajouri-Poonch sector, Naushera sector also, in order to force infiltration into the valley sector, where the actual infiltration is taking place. over the last couple of years, all the infiltration has been happening in the valley sector. Now, which are the main areas in the valley sector where infiltration takes place? It starts from the south, in Uri. From Uri, it goes up to a place called Lipa, which is here actually, and then it goes to Tangdhar. And from Tangdhar along the Shamshabari, this is the Neelam River, it goes right up to Keren here, and then from Keren to Machal, and from Machal it comes to Gurez here. Now, I would say in all this, the highest amount of infiltration normally takes place in this belt, along from Tangdhar to Keren. The second largest probably takes place here in the Machal area, then in the Uri sector, and of late, Dawar, this area of Gurez has been quiet, and the area of Gulmarg has been quiet for the last 15 odd years, although it is always prone to infiltration too. So having said that, why suddenly Uri all of a sudden? This particular year, the snow levels have been extremely low. And as you know that every year, when the snow is high, the fencing, the anti-infiltration fence gets submerged, and about 30 to 35% of the fence on the LOC, in the valley part of the LOC, that gets completely submerged and hardened, and it's possible to walk over it. This year, even that has not happened in some places. So the window for infiltration has opened up at the end of January. In fact, I would say third week of January. Normally, the window for infiltration normally opens up in April, May. This year has opened up much earlier. And 2018, if you're linking it to events which are happening in Pakistan with the kind of pressure on Nawaz Sharif, political pressures on the PML, and the general lack of central control in Pakistan, we are expecting a hot year in Kashmir, and for that you require definitely you require an optimum strength of terrorists inside the valley. You've got to make that happen. But that optimum strength of terrorists is not there. You have killed 210 terrorists, no doubt. Infiltration has taken place, we admitted last year. Approximately 125 young Kashmiris have been recruited in South Kashmir. So numbers have been made up, but not to an optimum level, to keep violence levels at the level which Pakistan will desire. And therefore, there's a need for infiltration into the valley. The second part is, over the last year, there was a complete focus on the terrorist leadership. And as a result, about 19 to 20 major terrorist leaders were killed. That leadership is not present today. The absence of violence in some of the areas of Kashmir today is primarily because of the lack of an operational control on the part of leaders. They have to infiltrate leaders. Therefore, it is important to now go beyond diversion in the Poonch, Rajouri, Naushera sector and take the diversion actually into the area from where infiltration takes place. And they're testing the waters in Uri. The last time a major artillery duel took place in Uri was in the month of November 2003. It was on my own instructions. I was the commander there at that time. After that, the ceasefire came on 26th of November. Thereafter, there was brief violations in 2008, brief violations in 2011, a major violation in 2012, never the use of artillery. And thereafter, the valley sector of the LOC has been quiet. It largely has been everything in the south. And now suddenly you are finding it happening in Uri. Couple of other reasons why Uri. If you notice, if from a technical angle, where the firing has started is an area, Hatalanga, people know it is this area of just north of Hajipir. It is the area which is populated on our side and not populated on their side at all. So all the casualties, all the destruction has taken place on our side. 1,000 people, approximately 300 families have deserted those villages and come into the Uri town. Now these are the optics which the media looks for. And that is what Pakistan is sending out these messages. We had the option. We could have responded in kind. Now, how do you respond in kind if something like this happens in Uri? All this is happening south of the river. South of the river so far. It's just happening south of the river. Uri is divided into two parts by the Jhelum North and Jhelum South. It's only happening south of the river. The Indian Army has responded to attack only in that area. And they've used artillery, they've used direct firing. They've destroyed the Hajipir Lone Hut Adam base. Yesterday I've spoken to you. I've spoken to all the commanders there. Incidentally, the unit under fire at the moment is my own unit, the unit which I commanded. They are the ones who are there at that location. So we had the option of going south of Jhelum and escalating beyond. You would have heard me on television sometimes saying, we must do vertical and we must do horizontal escalation. What is the meaning of this? Vertical escalation means the quality of your response, which means take it from small arms and sniping, take it to guided missiles, take it to mortars, take it to field artillery, and possibly up to medium artillery. Now this, what has happened so far, has gone up to field artillery. And that to direct firing field artillery, which is a very serious thing actually, direct firing field artillery. Don't go to mediums yet. We have the option of coming north of the Jhelum in an area where there is equal amount of population on our side and their side. Equal amount of population. So it can be equal duels can take place. Or we have the option of creeping northwards and going to Lipa, where there is no population on our side. And there's complete population on their side in the Lipa. And their brigade headquarters is visible right in front to us. We can take it further south, north. We can take it further north into Tangdhar. Let's see here to Tangdhar. And from Tangdhar, this belt, from this place till Kerala, here, is completely under our domination. That's the Neelam Valley. We are just looking down upon them. This is a very important artery of theirs, this road through the Neelam Valley, which supports all the logistics here. The logistics for all the formations which are deployed here, on the other side of the Neelam River here, the Pakistani formations here. Now we can interdict this road completely like we did in 2002, 2003. And if that happens, then Pakistan will be forced to use, for its logistics, will be forced to use what you are seeing on this map here, or this photograph. These are the bypasses. There are 3 bypasses, 1, 2 and 3. The Leswa bypass, etc. Very arduous. They have to go over the mountains and come on the side, about 30-40 kilometers of meandering thing, and you have to use these logistics. That's the last thing for us. So we've got the system of graduated responses that you can keep upping the end. Keep taking it up. And wait for his response. So when we say horizontal response means this. Let's go horizontal now. Let's go from Udi south. Let's go to Udi north. Let's go from Udi north to Lipa Valley. Let's go from Lipa, let's go to Tangdhar. From Tangdhar, let's go to the Neelam Valley. And it carries on like this. Or you go horizontal, where you take it up to the level of mediums. And mediums a direct firing road, which is devastating, absolutely. Right? So, I thought I must give you this broad understanding at the moment. Why haven't we done it so far? Why haven't we escalated horizontally so far? I think the options are with us. And all along the north of Udi, the advantage is with us. He also knows it. He is only testing the waters here. And he's got a beating. He's got a beating as far as his emplacements are concerned, weapon emplacements and his defenses are concerned. The only thing where we've had is our population has had to be displaced. I don't think this firing in Udi will continue in this manner. Although it can also continue. I mean, you don't find any kind of a definitive, rationale on the LC. The LOC is one of the most irrational places. I'll explain to you why it is irrational with 1 or 2 anecdotes separately. I can also tell you that a lot of people may disbelieve this, but you got a new corps commander in Kashmir today. You got a new division commander sitting in Baramulla also. Most people are not aware. The corps commander is an ex-DGMO. When the Pakistan army looks at these things, they look at it from every angle. They want to test him. They want to test the DGMO who's been talking to the DGMO on the hotline and say, in the field, let's see what you are. How will you respond? On the first Gola, are you going to throw the whole valley into flames all along the LOC? Or are you the kind who will gradually see this and keep calibrating it? The GOC at Baramulla, I hope you don't have anyone from the media here.
Well,
Okay.
They are.
it's not.
I'm from the media.
No, you are, I know that. I am from the media equally.
No, Chatham sir. So,
You know Chatham. Let me tell you,
Say only what you
nothing
want to
wrong with it. The GOC of the division at Baramulla, do you know his name? He's John Rawat. Also. He's also General Rawat. He's the man who was the commander in 2012 and 2013 at same place where the firing is taking place. Right? It is under his command, and you go back in the media reports of 2013, you will find the name of General Gulab Rawat as a brigadier at that time. People blamed him for putting Uri into flames at that time. He is the one who destroyed all those bunkers of the Pakistanis at that time. On the other side, the same area. I don't forget. So all this is now coming back. And these are attempts to try and, instigate you. Are you going to respond? Are you not going to respond? I think the Indian Army is rather professional. It will not respond in this manner. It will respond where we have got a major advantage. The irrationality of the LC, because the rest of the strategic and the other aspects will be explained by my other panelists. Let me explain to you the irrationality of the line of control sometimes. I remember the year 2008 when I was commanding the Baramulla division, the same division, same area. And in this area, south of Tandar, what you're seeing is the Lipa Valley area. I had gone on a visit to one of my units, and while visiting a high altitude post at a height of about 11,000 feet, I asked the local commander there, how many times have you been close to the line of control? Because I saw that the distance from the line of control to that post was approximately 700, 800 meters. He said, never. I said, why not? Because 700, 800 meters, if you leave without patrolling, it virtually willy-nilly goes into the other one's territory. He says, I'll do it. I said, fine. So I came away. And within 2 days, brave Rajputs went and put a base right at their perception of the line of control. Now, perceptions differ. And sure enough, that base remained for 2 days. On the third day, we found a large team of Pakistanis walking across with a white flag. They walked across with rifles, weapons, but dressed very awkwardly. They were dressed in tracksuits. And they came and surrounded this post of ours. And these boys were brave. They said, no, stay away. We are going to guide our commander here. You stay away. Don't come near us. So they kept them at a distance of 30, 40 meters, and there was a lot of tutu meme which happens on the line of control. And suddenly, irrational things happen. Suddenly, someone from the Pakistanis fired. One of our boys got hit below the eye, and he fell on the other side. At the small patrol, they opened up fire. They killed 7 Pakistanis. They ran helter-skelter. The officer who was there, Lieutenant Aziz, I remember his name to the day, was killed. Right? And there was hell to play. All over fire opened up, all along that place. And it was in the afternoon. We had to recover the body to make sure that our man's body is recovered. We recovered it by the evening. Then the CO asked me one question. So the CO climbed up on top and he asked me one question. He said, sir, what are my orders? I said, why do you need orders? He said, what happened on the line? Why do you need orders? He said, sir, I'm going across. I want to go across and crush this post from where these men came. I said, that you will not do. But you have the night. From now, 9 o'clock till 7 o'clock in the morning, you have available to you, do what you want. But you will not cross the line of control. And in the night, only I know what the Rajputs did. In the morning, they sent me photographs by fax. There was nothing left of that post. From our side of the post, we plastered that place completely and destroyed that post. The intercepts we got from Pakistan were in Urdu. किसने कहा था अजीज को आगे जाने के लिए? किसने बोला था उसको? Do you know that by the next afternoon, a helicopter came and took away the commander 75 Brigade from there. He was removed from command. So these are the kind of things which happen here. There is no rationality to it. It just happens as maybe just the irrational act of a young officer or something that which can instigate this kind of thing. Which is why I'm saying that these kind of things which happen on the line of control, there's a nature of it. You can rely, there are small scale incursions of this kind which will take place. There is sniping, and sniping is a very dangerous thing. It happens when you are unaware, when it happens on your patrols, it happens on your sentries. If you don't have the right configuration of your baffle walls and things like that, it will happen. You will have destruction of a bunker and casualties, like you recently had the destruction of a bunker with people inside being shot, with a bunker being destroyed by an anti-tank guided missile. I'm surprised how the army had not taken care of that by having enough of a baffle wall cover for it. But these are the things, it happens. Everywhere is not perfect, it's not a perfect kind of thing. There are different levels of firing which will take place. So it leads us to the major problem of Happymon Jacob's website later. How do you record each of these violations? Because as per the Indian Army after 2003, when the ceasefire came into being, the orders for us were, what constitutes a violation? Is that if 20 rounds have been fired at you and they've gone in the air above you, it's not a violation, even. But if those 20 rounds, even if 5 rounds have come and hit your bunker, and you heard the ping sound and you heard that the thing has been effective, then it's a violation. And this is something that we are going to discuss in the upcoming dialogue, the Ottawa dialogue, also how to define a violation. Because when we say 715 violations, our violations are very different to what the Pakistanis consider as violations. The firing which took place at the Sleepa Valley post in 2008, after this incident which happened with the Rajputs which I was mentioning, the whole night firing continued, whole day next day firing continued. Is it one violation? Or is it 50 violations? So what should be the time gap between a violation to constitute a different violation? It is a very, very technical thing which we have not yet been able to evolve, and Dr. Jacob knows it. We will try and find an answer and see that in the interest of the dialogue itself, the Ottawa dialogue itself, we hope to come to some kind of an understanding with the other side on what the meaning of a violation really is. As far as our progressive policy on responses, we are very clear. Usually we do not proactively trigger a violation, usually. But if we are forced to from other circumstances, it can happen. Progressively you will find that we may violate in some other area. We may violate in some other area when something has happened south of the Peak Punjab, it can happen north of the Peak Punjab, where we respond. Like the incident in Uri in 2013 led to responses by the Pakistan Army south of the Peak Punjab in the Rajouri area where you had the beheading of 2 soldiers, 13 Rajalif was the unit in 2013. Okay. The last bit. Can communication at any level help to reduce this? You see, many times these violations happen because of construction of bunkers, etc. The entire violation of 2013 in Uri happened because of the construction of a major bunker by us, which was giving us a decided advantage. Now, as for Pakistan's policy, they go by to 1949 and say, Karachi Agreement, no construction 500 meters either side. We say 1972, the Simla Agreement is silent on this aspect completely. So we continue and we allow them to also maintain and construct their bunkers. But they, by choice, once in a while when they find that an odd construction is going to put them at a disadvantage, they start taking objection to it. And then this thing starts, this problem starts. So if you have communications, if you are leaving it to communications between the DGMOs, it is too high a level. If you have local communications, and local communications at the moment are very, very fragile communications on WD cables, if you have proper communications at, let's say, a division level, a brigade, some selected brigade level, some selected unit levels where violations take place usually, it may lead to the ability to commanding officers and brigade commanders on either side being able to speak to each other quickly and hopefully resolve the problem. If nothing else, organize and set up a flag meeting immediately. And a flag meeting can be very, very effective sometimes. Usually flag meetings don't end in anything, but sometimes a local flag meeting which has been set up in very quick time frame, it always leads to some kind of an effect. So I'm always for this aspect of establishing communications along the line of control. The last part, do these LOC duels really have results? Let me tell you, very temporary, very temporary. To think that the LOC is the area where the major battle and conflict and war with Pakistan is going to be won, please forget it. Right? It doesn't give you the scope to do that. But it gives you the scope to maintain a moral ascendancy. And that is one of the concepts that the army follows. That we will establish a moral ascendancy over the adversary, show we are a far better trained army, we have better equipment, we have better emplacements, etc., etc. And this is the normal thing which you can achieve here, besides the destruction of a couple of bunkers, few casualties, etc., etc. I think I will have to stop here. Just remember one thing, that there has been no fighting in Kargil, there has been no fighting in Siachen for almost the last 15 years. Only it is the areas from Kabul Gali into the valley and south of the Peak Punjab where all the violations have taken place so far. Thank you, and I'll be happy to respond during the interaction.
Thank you, Ata, for that masterly presentation. I think you've been on the ground, you know the situation, and that's reflected in your presentation. Now, may I invite Nirupama?
So I'm going to come at this from a slightly different, very different perspective, I guess.
Use the microphone.
So that was a military man speaking. I'm the woolly-headed journalist who's been up and down that the LOC a couple of times to look at what the firing is, what the ceasefire violations are doing. But first, let me say that there are two ways of looking at the situation. One is to say, well, we see these things in India-Pakistan relations. There are phases. It goes up, it goes down. Things will even themselves out, if not in weeks, maybe in months, if not in months, if in a few years. And, we can manage the losses. It's all right. We can, water will find, or blood in this case, will find its level, and we'll manage the losses. The other is to see the present, as Ambassador Katju said, not in isolation. You can't see this in isolation, but slightly differently from what he said, rather than see it as something that, it's clear that, this is what Pakistan has been doing to us. I have, over the years, grown to see it as the distilled result of, the present. Every time, like a failed moment in Pakistan-India relations, I see it as a result of generations of failure, combined failure on both sides, by both India and Pakistan. And I tend to do that not because I don't have a appreciation of the strategic interests or the national interest, but just as a journalist, I see, and I've had the I can't call it a privilege, or I have the opportunity to see that every such failed moment in India-Pakistan relations is a lived experience at that moment for some people, if not for everybody, certainly not in this room, I guess, but for some people it is a lived experience. And you can take a long view, but that so-called long view will paper over this lived experience. And when we speak of strategic interests or national interests, we have to presume that these don't exclude people. So people's experiences do become important, I think, in that respect. And the ceasefire of 2003, it brought enormous changes to the lives of people. I do not think we can underestimate that at all. People on the borders, on the LOC. And one of the biggest, if you drive up and down that area, one of the biggest markers of this change is the houses that people have built. It's fantastic. What are they thinking? They're sitting on the world's biggest hotspot, interstate hotspot, and they are building houses with these pretty roofs and these tiles and huge places. And you ask them, hey, why did you build this house? You're sitting in the line of fire. What made you build this house? Nay, 2003 we thought peace is coming, and it's just 2 years away, 3 years, everything will be okay. That is why we built this house. Then it's got this huge gaping hole in the middle of that house. So, you see, there was that real expectation that things are going to change for the better. And they haven't, which is why I tend to say that it is a failure on the part of both nations, I think, to have made good of that ceasefire. And instead of doing everything to preserve it, Pakistan and India, we are willfully and happily and cheerfully, we are saying, let it go. You know, we can manage it. I think there are some groups that do conflict maps of the world. On any conflict map, or any of these, you know, you see some of these interstate hotspots. You'll see Korea, you'll see Congo, Rwanda, you'll see Russia and Ukraine, you'll see Pak, Afghanistan, and of course India, Pakistan. It's the only spot where people are dying on a near daily basis, and where soldiers also and civilians also. So happy, which brings me to, you know, if this thing actually becomes a trigger for General Hasnain says it won't happen, and we take some comfort from that. But if it actually becomes a war, then this ceasefire monitor you have to ditch it, because there won't be a ceasefire to protect. I think it's already a creeping war, you know. So soldiers know better than anybody else, I guess, what war is all about. You know, last month, the family of a soldier, they were waiting for his body, and they said, well, let's settle this one way or the other. We can't have this on a daily basis, people dying. Let's either talk to Pakistan, or let's have an aar-paar ki ladai. Let's finish it off. Let's just go. And the number of people who say that, either talk or let's have a full-out war and settle this once and for all. But you know, it's also the paradox of our times that war is now seen as the better quality than peace or than talks. You know, fighting is just as, you know, love has become a bad word in some sections in India. So has peace. So we have people arguing that, you know, Pakistan is killing our people, so therefore Pakistan should be taught a lesson. But I think that just means that more people will die, more soldiers will die, more civilians will die, more property will be destroyed. And I'm really glad that some people in the army appeared to appreciate this, and we had recently, and I think that was a very interesting thing. General Naravne and General Surinder, Western Command, and Attrack. Yeah, both of them, they made this intervention for statesmanship rather than brinksmanship, and they said, well, it's time to talk. And I thought that was very interesting, and maybe you could tell us what you think about it later on, because I didn't know, I mean, it was totally surprising that they said it. And the tally for this year, I shared some numbers, Dr. Happymon shared with me. This year, I think your numbers are a little down, but 20 people have died on our side this year alone, and 20 have died on the Pakistani side. And there are something like more than 70 people injured, and on our side, I think it's 40 injured. And of course, the number of CFVs have been going up steadily. So my question is, I mean,
2018, 40 so far.
40 on both sides.
Put together.
Put together, yeah, 40 on both sides. 2020. And more than 20 on our side. I don't know the exact number, but 20 definitely on their side. You know, some time back, Dr. Happy wrote a piece for my paper, the Indian Express, where he said that, and I think he had the right formulation, that this government prefers to let these deaths continue than take the political risk of talking to Pakistan, because there are no returns guaranteed from the talks, and it's very, very, very risky, politically risky. So my question is this: at what point, and I'll pose this question to General Hasnain also and others who would be able to answer this better than myself, is at what point do these deaths, this number of daily death, at what point does that become a political risk? At what point mind as a politician say enough people have died on the LOC that now we have to sit down and arrest this slide. And you know, it's pertinent, I think, to mention here that right now in Jammu, in Kashmir, Kashmir doesn't matter that much, but there's Kashmir and Jammu have become totally communally polarized. But within Jammu, that everybody knows, but within Jammu, there's a communal divide that really takes you by surprise. It's open, it is talked about freely, and it is it is expressed as this insecurity, this great insecurity because of demographic changes, of what one side is doing to the other. And recently there was a rape of a minor girl, a Bakkarwal girl in Kathua, and the communal divide over this rape, the way this rape has been communalized, because the people who are alleged to have done it are Hindus, the girl is a Muslim. The way that has been communalized is actually shocking. It is, in a sense, you could say that this was waiting to happen. But the openness with which it is happening and the way it's being fueled on both sides is dangerous. And I think because Kathua, Samba, all those places, and if something happens in all those places, then I think we're going to see repercussions all across, all the way up to Poonch, perhaps. And I'm told that Poonch is also it's a tinderbox right now. And combined with the internal situation in Kashmir, which is thanks to the, you said 200 militants had been killed, and I was in Shopian in December, and there was this police officer, an IPS guy from not Kashmiri, and he was sitting in his office and saying, hey, look, we've killed 200 people, but the number is the same even now. The number of militants right now is 200. In this district, we have killed, we had 32, we killed X number, but the number remains 32. So how are we going to tackle this situation? We need to do something more than just kill people. So there is that feeling that has taken. That is fast growing even in the police, and as we saw, the armies also, some people have started saying that. So all in all, these are just my observations, and I think I'll stop there. The situation doesn't look great. I think we can take comfort from an army man's view that this is not going to lead to a conflagration. But as I said, how long can we keep on saying, keep on talking about this? I don't want to be sitting around a round table 20 years from now and saying, hey, ceasefire violations, nothing's going to happen. Relax, there'll be ceasefire violations, we can handle it. So I think we have to move beyond that. That close.
Thank you, Nirupama. I think one can feel your anguish. We all are anguished, but the interstate relations have their own dynamics. And I wish there was no conflict among nations. But there's one point that I would make before I hand over the floor to Happy. I, for one, have always believed that there is an internal situation in Kashmir which is entirely our issue. If there is a developing communal situation in Kashmir, as you were saying, it is for us to handle. Or if there is a problem in Jammu, it is for the Indian state to handle.
May
I speak?
Yes,
Please.
yes.
I don't think our domestic politics or our view of domestic politics should reflect, and I've long argued this, should reflect on our relationship and our approaches to Pakistan. They are two separate issues altogether, and they should be kept separate. There is a firing by the Pakistan state agencies. There sponsorship of terrorism in India, which is, I think, undeniable, can be calibrated, but it's going on, and that is under the aegis of the Pakistan state. Now, to mix that with our domestic situation, the way we should conduct our polity and society, the way we should manage it, of course, that has to be managed in accordance with our constitution. But to mix these two up, I would think is the sure trap that the Pakistanis want us and have wanted us to walk into. So with those words, and I would request that at the end, when we conclude and we have a further thing, we can always talk about this further. So that I'll ask Happy to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Katju Saab. Before I start, I just want to sort of make this point about what is really meant by a ceasefire violation. In fact, Ata Saab sort of pointed out the complications of counting what ceasefire violations are. Our data only captures a small part of the actual official data, and the actual official data, may I say, only captures a small amount of what actually happens on the ground. So I think that enormity needs to be kept in mind, and one ceasefire violation, as he's written several times in the past, could mean several hundreds of thousands of shots in 24 hours in a 70 kilometer, 50 kilometer area. So don't go by one ceasefire violation means one shot. No, that's not what we're talking about. So just some basic data to understand the enormity and the gravity of the situation. In 2015, for example, India reported 405 violations, Pakistan reported 248 violations. Come to 2016, India reported 228 and Pakistan reported 379, and then the real increase begins in 2017. India reports 860 violations, Pakistan reports 1,970 violations, and in 2018, in January, India reported 192, and Pakistan till February 22nd has reported 391 violations. So you're looking at really infiltration in Jammu and Kashmir. 2015 witnessed 121 infiltrations. 2016 witnessed 371 infiltrations, and 2017 had about 515 infiltrations. What are we talking about?
Infiltration attempts.
This
Those are
is
not infiltrations.
infiltration attempts.
We don't have difference.
I took it from the SATP.
These are the attempts.
So what the data really tells you are several things. One, that CFBs and casualties have gone up in 2017. 2017 has been the bloodiest year since the oral agreement for a ceasefire agreement was agreed to in 2003. There is the caliber of the firing has gone up. In fact, Ata Saab also made this point about the use of medium guns and artillery, and I hear on the other side, I hear about the use of anti-aircraft guns and rockets and all the rest. So you're talking about the slow but steady increase in the caliber of the weapons used. There's a drastic increase in infiltration attempts, as Ata Saab puts it, since 2015. 2018 doesn't also seem to have any reduction at all in that sort of increasing spate of violence. Surgical strikes, may I say, may not seem to have had much of an impact on ceasefire violations or on infiltration. If you the 2016 surgical strikes, that was probably not the first surgical strike in any case. So being the election year in Pakistan and being the election year probably in India next year, you are not really looking at a letter in this sort of a game of firing at each other. Why do ceasefire violations take place? Clearly, there is, as Tanvi mentioned at the beginning, there is a certain argument that India makes, which is the infiltration under cover, that seems to be the Indian argument, and the others have actually nuanced that argument. There are several other reasons. Unprovoked firing, Pakistan calls it, or deflecting attention from the Kashmir insurgency. These are the arguments that the Pakistani side makes all the time. But what are some of the non-traditional or sort of out of the box, if you look at it from a on the ground point of view, what are some of the reasons why ceasefire violations take place? One reason, of course, is the testing fire. Again, Ata Saab made that point about the new DGMO getting appointed as the corps commander. And then the testing firearms, if you have a new battalion or a new commander appointed on the other side, the opposing side tests the caliber of the guy being appointed. That always happens. And then there is, of course, sometimes you have local commanders taking things into their hands. Sometimes you have the construction of bunkers, etc. You have civilian movements happening, especially from the other side, because they don't have a fence and they have civilians living up to the zero line, unlike on the Indian side. You have sometimes the occasional, again, Atasa put it correctly, that this is a notion. The line of control is a notion, not something that is really made on the ground with survey stones, etc. Then you have occasional land grab attempts. Again, he put it correct. So you are looking at several of these non-traditional explorations for CFPs taking place. So you're looking at two baskets here. One basket is the political explanation. The other basket is the non-political explanation, right? So why do these ceasefire violations happen? Well, because there is, of course, the terrorism angle, there is the infiltration angle. I'm not disputing that at all. That clearly continues to exist. There are inadequate mechanisms to control ceasefire violations, clearly. There are hardly any agreed upon standard operating procedures to deal with the management of the line of control. The CFA, the ceasefire agreement of 2003, continues to be an unwritten agreement, so you don't have any, so what does the ceasefire agreement really mean? The do's, don'ts, the principles, norms, etc. There's no clarity about that. Then, of course, I think on both sides there is a certain mistaken optimism, false optimism, that what happens on the line of control can be controlled at that level, they don't escalate. The political causes, as it were, there are, of course, the non-political causes which I just mentioned. There are, of course, the political causes. Since 2014, I have a feeling that the political factor has increasingly become more prominent. There is on the Indian side, and the Indian government has clearly said so, that we have given a lot more autonomy to the commanders and the army and the BSF, which translates into a lot of political permissibility to fire and take things into your own hands. On the other hand, there is the increase in infiltration. There is a feeling in Pakistan that Kashmir is burning, therefore this is the time to up the ante in Kashmir, and there is no point in denying a linkage between the ceasefire violations and the insurgency of terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. That link certainly exists. But CFVs are also increasingly linked to political calculation, domestic political calculations, election cycles. For example, I just pointed out the possibility, the elections in India and Pakistan. Are the two sides going to reduce firing or be seen as giving in simply because of the elections and the domestic political stature of political leaders? I know one cannot link the two, but unfortunately, to my mind, there is a link between the two. And for Pakistan, flagging Kashmir through ceasefire violations continues to be a major rationale. Insurgency, as I said earlier, and in Kashmir and CFPs are linked. So why is there no progress on controlling CFVs? And I think in 2017, December 25th, when the two national security advisors met in Bangkok for a back channel, not really back channel, but off the radar sort of a meeting, I'm given to understand that a proposal for a DGMO meeting was placed before the Indian side. In fact, the Dawn newspaper reported that such a proposal was placed. And soon after that, the Pakistani military establishment issued a clarification that no, we never placed any such proposal on the table in Bangkok. And my reading of that is because the Indian side didn't really warm up to that. The reason, and again I go back to what Nirupama said, the reason probably why the Indian side did not warm up to that is simply because you do not want to invest in a process that may not lead you anywhere. And if you invest in a process that may not lead you anywhere, it may have political costs domestically because of elections and other sort of issues. So in a sense, to put it bluntly, the military casualties in the LOC IB sector is not really costing the Indian government so much today. And therefore there is no urgent felt need in Delhi to sort of reduce the, to sort of go in for a negotiation with Pakistan at this point of time. On the other hand, to give credit to New Delhi, there is also no let-up in the infiltration from the other side. So therefore it becomes difficult for the Indian side to go in for a negotiation with the Pakistani side, simply because you're not seeing any let-up in the infiltration numbers. So this is just one part. One part is the political part, the political causes for ceasefire violations. So if the politicians and the establishments in Delhi, Islamabad and Rawalpindi decide to sort of reduce ceasefire violations, they will reduce, to my mind, only up to a point. Then there are of course the local factors. Local factors can sometimes play up, even in the presence of even in the absence of political permissibility. So picture gets even more complicated. My last few points. And I do believe, looking at the data, if you compare the data on ceasefire violations, if you compare the data on ceasefire violations and escalation between India and Pakistan from 2002 to 2017, you see two trends. CFVs have often, ceasefire violations have often led to escalation. And that serious conflict escalation between India and Pakistan can happen even in the absence of terrorist attacks. Point number one. Point number two, when ceasefire violations and terrorist attacks occur simultaneously or sequentially, the potential for escalation dramatically increases. And in the media age, when you have media really zooming on what is happening on the line of control and reporting, and the rise of nationalism both in India and Pakistan, you do see a lot more potential for escalation. That, to my mind, that is the dangerous part. So excessive focus on terrorist attacks somehow prevents us from looking carefully at what happens on the line of control and its escalation potential. So what happens on the line of control may not really remain on the line of control. Just a few points, because Katju sir mentioned that in the beginning, on my recent visit to the other side of the line of control, and I can probably answer more of that during the Q&A. But
why don't you do it now?
Oh, I'll probably do that right away. I had a 3-day after, of course, requesting the Pakistani side for almost 2 years to grant me a visit to their side. And after having visited the Indian side, the line of control, and the thanks to Atas and others, the Indian side, both the LOC and the IB from J&K up to Gujarat, through Punjab and Rajasthan for almost a month on the Indian side. I requested the Pakistani side, and such a visit came about in December last year for 4 days. 3 days on the line of control and 1 day in GHQ in Rawalpindi. So I first went to, of course, the divisional headquarters in Murray, and then went to the brigade headquarters in Rawalakot and in Muzaffarabad, Domain, of course. And then went up to the zero line, went to certain villages which faced the Indian firing. Of course, I remember visiting on the Indian side, villages which come under the Pakistani fire. Clearly, one thing that to be understood, this was a sanitized visit. Obviously, the militaries will only show me what I am supposed to see, and on the other side, clearly there was no recording that was possible, no photographs were possible. I could only meet people up to or above a certain rank. That was clearly not the case on the Indian side, and I think that is to be understood. I'm not clearly creating an issue out of that. But on the Indian side, of course, I entered the bunkers. I was treated as one's own, which I was clearly. So one thing that stands out very clearly on the Pakistani side is that there is a lot more pressure on the Pakistani military today from the civilian population living close to the zero line, because they live close to the zero line, and there is a lot more damage and therefore pressure on the Pakistan army, and therefore there's a lot more willingness to negotiate confidence building mechanisms, measures by the Pakistani side, and that came out very, very clearly. The second point that I want to make is, in contrast to say what was the case in 2006-07, today there is a great deal of focus on the Kashmir question. From the villagers to traders in Chakoti, to brigade headquarters in Domel and Rawalakot to GHQ in Islamabad. There is a mention of the political question on Kashmir at every level. And there is also a feeling that there is no need to therefore, there's a need to focus on Kashmir, and therefore things are happening because of Kashmir, and that there's a certain sort of triumphalist feeling about Kashmir, and that, in my opinion, might prevent a serious rapprochement, a negotiation and eventual rapprochement between the two sides. The Musharraf formula has absolutely no takers. I asked at several levels, and the feeling was that every idea has a time, and this is probably not the time for that. I just conclude with a point about what needs to be done. I think I completely agree with General Hasnain that we need to have DGMO meetings and not just telephone conversations, the Tuesday telephone conversations. The Directors General should meet in Islamabad or in Delhi, as you have written in the past, for a military conference of 2 days at least. And then, why do I say that? Because in the past, when the Director Generals of the BSF and the Rangers have met for the biannual conference, you see a palpable reduction in ceasefire violations and violence in general. And in 2013 December, when the DGMOs met, you saw for several months a reduction in ceasefire violations. So I think this can sort of contribute to a reduction in violence. The NSA meetings should continue. Probably it can lead to something. But I think in a politically charged environment, there is only so much you can achieve in terms of what. So I'm not going to get into too many of the other proposals one might have. But I broadly say that in this sort of a situation in 2018, early 2018, what needs to happen is the meetings, conversations between the DGMOs and the NSAs. I leave it at that. Thank you, Dr.
We now have 45 minutes. We can go up to 110. So we have 35 minutes. No, 45 minutes. I think we can have a discussion for about, say, half an hour. Then we can, I'll take a few minutes. My colleague can take a few minutes. So we could. And this part, I'm told, will not be recorded. But I'm happy that you went on the report. So the floor is open. Yes, ma'am. And if you could also, if you want some panelists to answer that question, your question, then please state that, and also it would be good if you introduce yourself.
Thank you, sir. I'm Dr. Shalini Chawla from Center for Air Studies. Extremely fascinating discussion and comments. Saturday, very, very well spent. Thank you, Happymon. I have a question for General Hasnain, and I think to some